La Soga is opening August 13th, and the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, New York City, Charles Tri-State area, and it is written by and stars Manny Perez, as well as being directed by Josh Crook, who are both joining me here at WKCR. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
So I guess, Manny, because the story came from you, I guess if you can kick it off for us and just tell me the synopsis of the film. What's the story? What's it about?
Well, the story is it's based on true events. It's basically a man who is out to revenge his father's death. And looking for revenge, he finds his soul, his innocence that he lost 20 years ago when the death of his father occurred. And in it, the journey is a beautiful journey. At the beginning of the film, you have this monster of a man who's a killer. By the end of the film, you sort of fall in love with him. And it's a beautiful journey. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that's what grabs people, just the beautiful journey that this man goes through. It's sort of a great redemption.
Mm-hmm. And, you say it's inspired by true events. Tell me a little bit about what those events are and how the story came about.
Well, about 12 years ago, I went on vacation to Dominican Republic, to my town, Santiago, which is out in the suburbs of Dominican Republic, a town called Baitoa. And growing up, I had a great friend of mine, well, not a great friend, he's a town friend, that we both moved to the United States. He became a drug dealer, and I became an actor, sort of. And then he got deported for being a bad boy. And when he got there, he basically started robbing banks and doing bad boy things. And he was sort of he felt he was above the law. And the government, these deportees were sort of destroying the country. So the government set up these death squads to take down these guys. And one of these guys, this death squad guy, came to my hometown looking for my friend, found him in his house, dragged him outside, and plain daylight, took a gun and shot him in the head and threw him on the back of this, it was a pickup truck Toyota that had like about 50 bullet holes on it, and drove him around town as a display and took him to the city. And I was there, and I was like, man, what is that? Who is that monster that shot this friend of mine? And from there came the story of like why I said, well, let me take the license to write about that monster, but not that monster, my own monster, the monster that I created, which I gave this guy a heart. And that's what you get when you see the film. At the beginning you see a monster, at the end you fall in love with this man.
Wow, so there were really people hired by the government, very similar to kind of the opening scene here in the film.
Exactly.
That just went out, found these criminals, and publicly executed them.
Yeah. They basically built this fear factor. So when these guys came into town, every bad boy in town used to just disappear, because they came to town for a purpose. This happened about 12 years ago, but really I think it's still going on, where the cops are just destroying these or taking down these bad boys. Because really the country, I mean, it's a beautiful country, but you do have a lot of deportees that they think they can just be above the law. And so I understand why the government is doing it, and and it's sad to say, but they're just trying to put order in a world full of chaos.
Wow. And how old were you when you saw this?
I was about 12 years ago, so 20-something. Prior to that, I visited the country, and also writing the script, I also did a lot of research on generals that became millionaires, generals that have mansions. Till this day, they still do. And you wonder, well, how does a general become a millionaire? And it has to do with all the corruption that's going on in the island, But the great thing is, and I think Josh should talk about this, is that when we did test screenings, we invited people from different countries, third world countries. And they're like, look, that happens in my hometown as well. Maybe you should talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't know anything about the Dominican Republic, when I set out to do this movie. Manny brought me the script, and I thought it was an incredible story, full of universal characters and themes and things that everybody can relate to, except set in this very distinct, rich culture. And but we were down there for 3 months, shooting. I learned a lot about it, and everything that Manny's saying is really true. And it's really a stark reminder of how most of the world lives. You have America, and it's easy to forget. that most of the world operates on, men with guns and, rich, powerful people. And they basically, anyway, so without getting too into, the actual politics of the Dominican Republic, it is, I think that's what the story really challenges, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's really important for the Dominican people and why they've responded, because they haven't seen it. The people who make movies down there are the rich. And so here's a movie that, well, we don't care, we're Americans, Manny's, from the DR, but he's been here for a while, and so we have that context where we can approach it. We're not sensitive to it. We're not trapped on the island and necessarily have to answer for it. So we were able to tackle a lot of stuff that when we screened it for Dominicans, they've just responded enthusiastically. They've never seen it. Nobody touches it in television or feature films, and so it's really been a special project in that way.
Wow. Can you tell me maybe a little story about some of the reactions that you've gotten for people? Maybe an anecdote that kind of sums up in a nutshell this reaction that you're touching upon.
There's a scene in the movie where some gangsters have taken over a cockfighting ring and they're robbing it, and they're robbing the people in there of money, and the police show up. When we were shooting that scene, we had a bunch of extras dressed as the police. And I had noticed, a lot of the police in the DR are pretty lazy and hang around, and they play this game, with a stick and the water bottle caps. It's a traditional Dominican game. So I thought it'd be funny, as a joke, to have one of the cops playing that while they're killing time in the thing. And we started doing that, and immediately everybody shut that down. They're like, wait a minute, this is depicting the cops in a way and all that. I was able to get one shot off of that action, and it made it into the movie. When we screened it in the DR for the Dominican Festival, that got a huge response, because they live with that corruption every day. They live with those cops all the time. They have to pay them off at the when they get pulled over and all these other things, and most of them are just underpaid, lazy screw ups, really. So that's an example of how it was challenging to put that stuff in the movie, but at the same time, the reaction is just it's really just been enthusiastic.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, in that same scene that you're referring to, one of those same cops is like texting on his cell phone.
Exactly. They don't care. They don't.
In the middle of like this hostage situation.
Well, right now, it's crazy because we shot this film 2 years ago, and right now, about 3 weeks ago, they have this whole campaign out there where teenagers are wearing T-shirts that say in Spanish, please don't shoot me, I'll stop. The reason why is because about a month ago there was a student, a college student in the capital, that was pulled over at nighttime. Now, at nighttime in the DR, there's no such thing as cops are not out after 10 o'clock. No one really stops for cops after 10 o'clock because usually they're not cops. So in this case, this guy was driving with his father, and he was told to pull over. So he's like, well, okay, well, I'm gonna pull over with this light because it's too dark here. So he was like, I'll pull in the light, and they just shot him. The guy died. He died. So these are the things that the country's dealing with right now. So, and this is a big campaign right now running against cops doing this, people against the cops doing this. So we're not saying, first of all, we're not saying that the cops are bad. We're not portraying the cops to be bad. We're just showing the reality of what goes on in the country, in regards to cops, in regards to generals, in regards to just deportees who are taking over. We're just showing the reality of what goes on in the DR.
I think that's important, is that instead of, a lot of times people will set out to make a movie that really exposes the corruption, and they cast a blanket over the whole thing, and that's not what we're doing. In this movie, you also have journalists and other people, people who are fighting the good fight. Even the president in the movie is putting forth an effort, in which I get the sense is that the current president is actually trying. Well, but the problem is in an area in a country like that where the corruption is so deep rooted, it's really it's difficult.
Well, also to add to this regarding the president, when we had the screening in Toronto, which by the way, this is the first Dominican film to make it to Toronto, which is a big deal for the country and for us filmmakers. He basically flew us down to the DR because he wanted to see the film, to see what the big deal was about. And when he saw it, he, it was a little scary when we went down because I was like, man, I'm gonna get arrested. And he got up, applauded, and said, listen, man, I want to thank you. I mean, I think what you guys are doing, you're showing the world what this is about, and I'm fighting this every day. What you're showing me, I'm trying to control it.
Wow.
So I'm glad you guys are doing this. So he gave us the stamp of approval, the president did, which is pretty great for us because
it's a lot better than the stamp of not approval.
exactly.
Send his boys after you.
Because we were freaking out at one point or another.
Wow. Now, you touched upon something really interesting, which I want to talk about. Would you say that this is the first Dominican film?
Yeah.
So I guess, Josh, I'll throw this over to you. Tell me a little bit about the production of the film. Manny just called it a Dominican film. It was shot both in DR and in New York City. So tell me about just how this film got made. Yeah.
Well, it really is. I mean, the whole drill for the movie was to stay very close to the passion and the inspiration that Manny, that inspired him to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we were all working under that. And I think it's maybe even a more Dominican movie because I didn't know anything about the country before I went down there. So I surrounded myself with Dominicans, and I really deferred to them. I mean, in all of these little details. I mean, one, I got down there, and I'm sensitive to a lot of things because I don't know. It's not every day for me. A Dominican would be like, okay, that's every day. But to an outsider, to an American, those are amazing details. So I was sensitive to that stuff and really wanted to infuse the movie with that type of richness. What is it that makes the DR special? What is it that makes it different than Puerto Rico? I think in the outside world, there's a lot of confusion about that, of like where the Dominican Republic begins and ends. So I think because I went down there, and most of the production was Dominican. Our crews, all these people who were working on it, producers, they were all Dominican, and they really instructed the movie. Me and Manny worked on the characters. I worked on the scene design and shots, but the flavor, all of that other stuff was really brought to it by the production staff and the Dominicans that we were working with. So there was a very small handful, maybe about 5 people that came down from the United States, and everybody else was Dominican. So I really deferred to them in terms of keeping this thing authentic and and very Dominican.
And I also got to say, I thought, and I still think that Josh being an outsider is why the film is so amazing. If a Dominican director would have he wouldn't care about those little details. To him, it's like an everyday thing. This man saw details. He's like, shoot that. And I was like, that's great. So I sort of love the fact that he directed this, really, because he brought something that I say is not in the script. When I wrote it, I'm very detailed with it, and I think you mentioned that, but he brought something else that is not in the script. And I must say, thank you, really, because that's something that you don't, it's rare to find. Especially with directors, because he made it real Dominican. I mean, he made it like even those details with the little kid running the little tire.
Yeah.
That's a Dominican thing. Only Dominican know what that is.
Yeah.
And he picked that up and he shot it. And those little details matters, especially to a Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the beauty of it.
Yeah, definitely. Like we were talking about, it's a Dominican film, but of course, some parts of the film happen in Washington Heights in New York City.
Yeah.
So what was it the same crew? Was it a different crew? How did the production here work?
Well, obviously, it's hard to get a visa if you're in the Dominican Republic, so we assembled an American crew.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the guys that were working on it down there were obviously a cinematographer and production designer.
Mm-hmm.
But we it's easy for us to put together a crew in New York. So that I would say that's that's kind of an American part of it. Yeah. But all of that stuff, all of the details and the situations is all taken from real life.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another important thing. And in addition to having the flavors and the scenery and all those details be Dominican and authentic, so were the situations. The situations were based on things that either Manny had seen, had read about, and in our research we found out a lot of things. So we would change scenes to make it closer to something. And people actually have said some of the criticism was like, "Oh, this is ridiculous." A lot of them are defensive Dominicans or just want to paint a rosy picture.
Yeah.
But we actually went out of our way to the scissor scene, which I'm sure you remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken from real
Yeah.
life.
Real life that happened in Washington Heights.
Wow.
So anyway, there was a real effort to stay true to it, not just in terms of Manny's vision and inspiration, which I think is the heart of the movie, but all those details, how the story unfolds and how the situations unfold is, we spent a lot of time and energy trying to keep it real.
And of course, the New York scenes. I mean, that's what percentage of the movie is that? It's
very small.
It's a very small. It's mostly in the DR. It's really a Dominican movie, as you say. Now, off mic, we were talking about something, Josh, that I think I'd like to go into a little bit more, which is about that I don't know that I've seen really Dominican movies here in America.
You haven't.
Tell me about the Dominican quote-unquote film industry and how this may have sparked a change in it.
Well, when we went down there, what we had was an action drama, and we were told by everybody that this is a high-risk venture because all Dominicans like to watch are comedies. And so their whole industry was based around doing these, comedies about, guys hanging out at beach resorts or baseball or something like that, real lightweight stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we said everybody likes action movies, everybody likes dramas. And so we thought, that's what we're going to do. And we believed in it. And I think for a lot of the people that invest in movies there and produce movies there, they were waiting to see what happened with this, how the public responds. And it's been such a phenomenon down there. I mean, 100% awareness of this movie that they started looking at their own material and saying, wait a minute, we can actually do real movies that get off the island, that speak to larger themes and can be taken seriously dramatically. And so I think there's a real effort. I mean, there's a lot of talent in the DR. There's directors, there's actors, there's amazing crews, but they've all been, up until recently, put to work doing pretty lowbrow stuff. And it's not that they don't want to do it. It's just that the producers, the money people just don't trust it. So that this movie has been, and looks like it might be, the biggest movie in Dominican history for their own market, it encourages the rest of them to take them seriously and take their own talent seriously, because there's a lot of talent on that island. So I think it's a special movie in that. It's a special movie in terms of the history of the film industry in the DR.
Now, we mentioned that the film is being released on August 13th here in New York and in the Dominican Republic, as well as Puerto Rico. But, you said that you screened it in front of Dominican audiences. So where was that? Were those in the festival circuits?
Yeah, there's a festival that actually the president is behind, called Cine Global Dominicano, that happens every November. So we were invited down there, and it's funny, they have this huge theater called Teatro Nacional where it seats 1,200 people. In that theater that night was 2,300 people standing.
Whoa.
And when the film ended, they applauded, and they were standing for 20 minutes nonstop.
Wow.
We were on stage. We were like, we just sit there and watch them, and they were just yelling and screaming with so much happiness, so much celebration. Man, we were like so proud of this thing.
It's really the best screening I've ever been to of any movie I've been to. I've never seen a movie mean that much to an audience.
Yeah.
And you have some of these people would come in, and some of them had never even been to a movie theater before.
Wow.
So here you have, some of these people come in, never been to a movie theater before, and then see their world on the big screen, beautiful in the way it is. It was really, it wasn't even a standing ovation. It was a celebration.
Yeah.
It was really something special.
And man, we went to Toronto, and we thought Toronto was like, this is big for us. I mean, it's our first film in Toronto. And for the island, the DR was something way beyond the Toronto experience. It's my best experience ever with any film I've ever done in my life in regards to festival.
What I think is really misunderstood about this movie, I don't think it's misunderstood, but I think one of the things that the Dominicans get that maybe some other art house audiences might not get is that this movie speaks to what they like in movies as well. So many cultural movies are preachy or lectury. It's like, look at this culture from the outside of this is how I'd like to see these people, or this is that audience, they find them really boring. What they want to see is heroes and villains and action and drama and romance and all of these other things that make up a great tale. And so one of the things that I think has been really great is to infuse this passion, infuse this thing to bring this world to life, but in the context of a well-told story.
Sure.
I don't know why that shouldn't be important, or why they
Yeah.
you know.
On that note, Manny, of course, you wrote the script and you are the star of the film. Now, you've done a lot of acting, and this is your first script to make it to the big screen, right?
Well, I had another one called Washington Heights that I sort of co-wrote and co-produced with a few friends of mine about Washington Heights.
Right.
And that was about 10 years ago.
Right. I mean, this is your first, like, solo
Exactly.
work,
This
kind
is
of
like, yeah.
your opus, whatever, if you will.
Okay.
So, I mean, I assume that you kind of always saw yourself in the role? Did you?
Yeah, I did. You know, I had the role in my mind for 10 years. So, and it's funny because when we started 2 years ago looking for the money, we sort of worked with each other in a prior film, so we knew what he could get out of me and what I was expecting from him to sort of guide me, you know. So it was easy for me to jump in the role. What was hard was getting the money.
Yeah.
But to jump in the role, I found it so easy. Plus, I'm the type of actor that I deal with in the moment. I don't deal with I'm not one of these actors that love to, I'm in the moment. I try to be real for that and be honest in that moment.
Yeah.
And that sort of is my thing. That's where I pull all my energy and my emotions from that moment. So I don't know. I guess I work different than other actors, but to me, that's what honesty is. And
Yeah.
Okay. So, because we're talking about how obviously character is so important, how, you wrote this character thinking probably that you're going to be this character. So why don't you talk a little bit for our audiences about who this character is? Tell me a little about what happens in his childhood, his, he's about what he eats and what he doesn't eat, what he does for a profession and all that stuff, the kind of the tormentation, because obviously a character's not interesting unless he's being pulled this way and that. So talk a little bit about that.
I don't want to give the whole story, but basically we start off with this guy in prison. We flash back to a kid who is afraid to kill a pig, and he loves the pig, and he doesn't want to touch the pig. And he has a love interest, a little child friend that he's like, oh, she's cute. And anyway, she leaves to New York. He stays in the island. And an incident happened where his father gets killed by this deported drug dealer. And that changes his life. The innocence is gone. He's no longer innocent. He is taught to be a killer. His father, by the way, was a butcher. And at that moment, his father's trying to teach the kid how to be a butcher. He doesn't want to kill the pig, this pig that's going to get butchered. So the point is, he loses the innocence because this general takes the kid on and makes the kid into a killer, a hired to kill type of guy. And he becomes this monster. And to me as an actor, I always looked at him as like a child that never grew up. He stayed in darkness and lost his innocence and became this monster. But he's still a child. And the way he deals with life, the way that when this girl comes back into his life 20 years later, he doesn't know how to handle her. He doesn't know how to talk to her. He's still, in a way, in a depression mode because he's thinking about what happened to his father. At the same time, he's looking for revenge. So in his mind, he's thinking revenge, my father's going, blah, 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 blah. There comes a point where he has a nervous breakdown, and that's when he realizes what he's missing in his life. And that's when, in that moment in the film, I think is the climax of the character where he lets go all that depression. And he finds his soul and becomes sort of human again in some way. Now, as an actor, what I found challenging is that every moment I had to ask Josh, hey man, what was the prior scene? Because I need to know where I'm coming from. Because all the flashbacks, it could be a little complicated as an actor to figure out, am I true to this moment? And that was great working with Josh. He sort of guided me into like, okay, you just came from here, you're going here, you're in this moment right now. And that, I think, it was the challenge for us working together. But I truly feel that at the end of the day, all the moments are real. And I'm sort of anal when it comes down to these moments as an actor. And I feel like they came through, and very happy with the work, in this film.
It's very interesting because, there's this kid, and his father teaches him how to kill a pig.
Exactly.
And then shortly thereafter, there's this traumatic incident, and he's taught how to kill a human. And, of course, I'm sure you're aware that, one of the reasons that they tried, heart transplants with the pig is because this is an animal that, even though it looks really different, in the way it lives and the way it dies, super similar,
of course,
to a human.
And pigs' eyes are exactly like a human eye.
Yeah.
The way they look at you. And pigs are very smart animal.
Very smart.
They're a very smart animal. They know what's going to happen, and they have these, intuitions. Okay, there comes a knife. Something's going down. So, in my opinion, I don't eat pigs. I saw against it. I just think it's, you're killing a human being, and the way they scream, they scream like little babies. So yeah, it's I don't know what the question was. Am I lost?
No, I was just bringing up, but that's very interesting how you talk about the eyes. I've never really looked deeply into a pig's eyes.
No, they look like human eyes.
But
the way they stare at you is like you're looking at a human looking at you.
And then of course the character in the movie. What does he say before?
Well, what he says before when he kills a person is just look at me.
Yeah.
Because he treats basically people's to him objects.
Yeah.
Animals. He cares more for animals than anything else.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny? That the butcher in the film, we actually hired a local butcher. And the local butcher who kills he kills pigs every day. He kills cows every day. But he can't kill a chicken. He said to us, he says, I can't kill a chicken. I don't know how to just take a chicken's neck and rip it. I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. And it was crazy because we were like, he was sharing this with us. And we're like, what? He said, yeah, I don't know. I can't. I have too much love for a chicken. When he was young, he had these chickens that his father killed in front of him, and he cannot kill a chicken at all, which I find to be so memorizing at that moment. And I was like, well, my character sort of goes through that because he doesn't care. He could kill a human being, but a pig he can't put his hands on.
Yeah,
which I found interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean it's really an incredible character study. I found it extremely compelling all the way through the end. And I guess we don't have much time left, unfortunately. But I guess I just want to end on, Josh, I guess with you, where you mentioned first Dominican film, and they're used to doing films one way. And so now you mentioned off mic a little bit about that there's now kind of government funding even now for films.
Yeah, they've set up a film fund like Puerto Rico has to attract investment and production to the island. Also, the community there of filmmakers they all know each other, and they all want to make great movies. I mean, they're all some of them are really talented. So I think with this movie, especially if it makes a lot of money down there, I think they're gearing up to start taking it more seriously. They're looking at it as a viable industry and a viable export, which is something I think was treated more as a hobby before.
Well, I also want to add to that, that when we started shooting this film, we're like, listen, we want to do what City of God did to Brazil and what Amores Perros did to Mexico, sort of put the country in the Hollywood map. Yeah. And I feel like we're sort of going towards that road with this film, and I'm very proud of it, very proud of it.
When we set out to make it, we really wanted to make the Dominican The Harder They Come. Yeah. Or the
City of God.
City of God. I mean, Jamaica has The Harder They Come, and they've been watching it for 30 years. We wanted to make a movie that every Dominican would watch. We wanted to make a movie that, the Dominicans in the States would watch and feel like that was a trip back to the DR.
Yeah.
And so it would bring it to life. And so when they saw it and they heard it and the sounds and the way it looked, and that would be, it would be something that would be a touchstone for them. And I think it will be for a long time.
Yeah, well, I think so as well. I mean, I enjoyed the film a lot. La Soga is the name of the film. It's gritty, it's real, it's action-packed, great character study. It's also got, some romance, and not going to say the ending, but it's coming out August 13th. You want to add?
We also have a website called lasogamovie.com,
okay,
which you can get all the theater listings and see the trailer, lasogamovie.com.
Cool. Well, August 13th, it's opening up here in the city. The movie is La Soga. It's written and starred by my guest Manny Perez, directed by Josh Crook. Thanks both for coming on WKCR.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.